Specialised disability. And set up
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, can we resume, please? I have not many goals in my life, but one of them is to finish on time. Not least because I know people have transport arrangements and they have to be ready to go on time. So we can present us too. Great, thank you very much everyone for resuming. One brief piece of housekeeping. Travel expenses. We have not been inundated with people asking for their travel expenses at lunchtime. Do please have a word with them. They'll be in, my people will be in room 1 at the end of today's session. We want to have a chat then. Otherwise, no problem about going home with your travel expense form, which everyone should have one. There is a cut-off deadline, which is 24th of March. So basically, if you want to take your form home, fine, but pretty much want to get home, sort it all out and get it in pretty quickly. And that's all to do with the way in which government repay us. So it just all has to be done by that date. There isn't a choice. If you did in fact have any problems with your form after you get home, if you know that charge fund is in, then do please contact us. Okay, we will be very happy to certainly get that sorted. Getting your expenses is really a very important part of the step. Okay. Right, yes. If you want a taxi booked, don't ask at the conference office, ask either Claire or Steph. Steph is sat right at the back of the room now, and we will sort them out. No problem with that. And I suggest you attempt to do that during the comfort break this afternoon, because by the time you get to the end at 3:30, you need to sort of your taxi sorted, because it's sort of school going home time, it just gets manic. And it's really important you book a taxi as soon as possible. Okay, right, moving on to the afternoon session on working together to deliver more. Yeah, great. And this afternoon session is called working collaboratively to deliver more. Two sort of parts to the session, and I think I'll introduce Brian to introduce the first part and himself.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy. Good afternoon. I've just realised, Steve, that if I stand where I was going to intend, so we've got somebody on Skype, and I'm going to be right in the middle of all of the slides. So hopefully if we can turn the computer around slightly, then the person will be able to see me, hopefully, so we can hear what's going on. Yes, good afternoon. My name's Brian Keating. I work for the Office for Disability Issues. And as when we started off this morning, and we said it's all around about how can we help and support you to work more collaboratively, to deliver more. And I'm going to add to the end of that in the Southwest as well, because specifically around about how can we do that in the Southwest. We've also heard that this is the 9th of 9 events, and we toured what was traditionally, if you like, the old government regions to ensure that we can facilitate the opportunity to ensure that disabled people's voice is actually heard, not only locally, regionally, but also, which I'll talk around this afternoon, heard centrally at central government, writing directly forward to ministers. I thought it would also be useful just to give you a little bit of an idea of some of the work as well that I undertake, particularly within ODI. Part of our main role in ODI as well is around about helping to deliver the government's disability strategy, which is something called Fulfilling Potential. Now, if you haven't heard about this document, what we'll do is ensure that the conference organisers can send you a link to that at the end if it's not already in the pack. And it's really, really important because actually it's the contributions of disabled people that came together to formulate that strategy. And it works across the whole of government, which is quite an unusual role for ODI, if you like. That not only do we work within the department, but we have the cross-government responsibility for disability, and that's working with all of the other government departments, whether it be the Home Office, whether it be communities and local governments, whether it be health, whether it be transport, etc. Including things like climate change and all of the other sort of issues you might not think might be relevant, but all of the departments at some time have issues around them. We help and support them, but also an important part of that is to enable the voices of disabled people to be engaged with through those departments as well. Some of the key areas of work, just out of interest for you, because the role that I undertook, I've been there about 7-8 months now, so it's still quite new to me working for ODI. Previously, before that, I worked in the older people in the ageing society environment, and there's lots of learning that I've been able to take from that to bring forward to the new role as well. One of my key roles is quite different, is around about, as well as enabling the voice of disabled people to be heard, is around about how can we work with and engage disabled people in the development of policy. And you'll be well aware that normally, traditionally, it's civil servants who would sit in Whitehall, develop a policy, and then it gets launched out and affects everybody around the country. I've been, in fact, 4 different cases or areas of work over the past couple of months where we've actually commissioned disabled people and disabled people's users groups, user-led groups and organisations to actually work with us and actually in some cases to take on the whole role of reporting back to ministers with recommendations on particular policy questions. So that'd be really, really interesting to step outside, so it's not civil servants doing the work, but when we talked about all of the issues of that lived experience this morning, of using that expertise and that experience to inform the development of policy in very different ways. Just very briefly, those areas of work, one of them is around about access to advocacy. So what is out there in the field of advocacy at present? How can you join up all the different types of advocacy information and advice to actually deliver better outcomes? And as an organisation that are driving and taking that forward as a piece of work. One of the others areas is how do we look at removing of the barriers, like a local community challenge, where we work together around the issues of red tape, and rather than sort of like complaining about it, how do we work and establish partners to have a framework to be able to look at what are the issues around that and how can we deliver solutions. And the 2 organisations that will be doing that will be shortly in the next month or so, feeding back directly their recommendations, findings to Mike Penning, who's the Minister of State for Disabled People. And the other final bit around that piece of work that I've been doing or looking at is around about assistive technology and innovation, and how can we capture the lived experience of disabled people and others to look at assistive tools, products in a very innovative way and come up with solutions. We'll be looking at developing something called a challenge prize, which will be launched later, hopefully in the summer, if it all goes ahead. But the Basel Centre here, and organisations based here, have been really instrumental in taking forward a piece of work that I think there were 6 workshops that were held with cross-impairment groups and individuals to find out how best can we in central government organise that work, and they'll be reporting back on that very, very shortly as well. So it really shows as well that commitment from central governments, etc., to how can we work for you and with you in driving and taking forward new opportunities that certainly weren't there previously before. I'd like to just go back and start, if I may, going back to the objectives that we had this morning, that we're going, because I think that really is important about the work that I'm going to talk around now. And all of the work when we started off today was this very important bit around ensuring the voice, and to ensure that the voice across the whole of the Southwest is heard, then it really is important to have and build on the networks, either the networks that you already have, or how can you develop those networks as well to bring into play into that new organisations, some of which you may not even be aware of. Certainly for me, one of the things that I found has been in the early days of my time at ODI is the amount of organisations, groups, and some of them are exceptionally small, and it's about how do we ensure the voice of those organisations are heard as well as the bigger, more well-organised organisations who have been around for some time. But how do you all work together as well in partnership to share that best practice, etc., and to build stronger organisations at a very local level and then at a regional level. I'd just like to also go back and say what's happened previously around about working better or working with disabled people. We have previously had an organisation some of you may well be aware of called EQ 2025. EQ 2025 was specifically set up for government to be able to engage with particular experts that could provide independent advice to government. This was set up about 4 or 5 years ago. It was set up as a non-departmental public body, which is a technical term across the civil service, and as part of the commitment of setting up all, as they're called, MDPBs, there was a commitment to review those organisations, to look at the way they work, to look at how they achieve things, and how they can continuously improve. And that's part of what all of our work is, to look at how can we all work together and continuously improve what we actually do. The sort of process that goes along meant that there was a review of that organisation. The review reported back sort of the summer of last year and raised some further questions that the government really wanted to have answered. So the actual findings of that review was that we still needed to have independent advice, but the way in which that was done, because of the way organisations and the way things have changed, could no longer be provided by EQ25, and a new process would be established. More importantly was to look at how we also then went out to consult with disabled people on 2 questions around how should the government obtain advice for disabled people, and how the government should engage with disabled people in the future, and what's the best mechanism for that to actually happen. The response to that consultation was published by the government in January 2014, and it came up with 2 specific recommendations on how they would actually do that. The first being that they would set up a fulfilling potential advice service, where we still needed to have advice, but they wanted to open that out further, and that they would commission an organisation to actually lead on taking forward that advice service, that they would commission the administration of that service, and that they would look to develop a contact list of around about, say, 40 independent experts to cover cross-impairments and cover the whole world of disability, to be able to respond to requests for advice from other government departments. That tender for that piece of work has currently been worked up at present, and will shortly be announced. And what I can do is give you a commitment that we will ensure that when that tender is going out, that all of the organisations and all of the regional events we've done will have the opportunity to see that, and if they wish to actually bid for that piece of work. The next sort of announcement that was made back in January was this bit around about trying to ensure, again, as we said, how can central government provide a structure to enable the voice of disabled people across the country to actually be heard. And it suggested that we should establish something called a fulfilling potential, which goes back to the strategy again, which was written and developed in co-production with disabled people, to have a national forum of which would bring together a range of organisations, but also have a very heavy representation from disabled people's user-led organisations as being part of that, and it would provide the opportunity for a representative from each of what we call those government regions to be represented at that forum, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that shortly. I'll go on to it now for you if you like. What really is important, and I think we've sort of said it before, that really the UK is actually at the forefront of lots of the work about how we positively engage and how the voice of all sorts of organisations, not just disabled people, but of the older people as well, is actually fed back and facilitated for ministers and central governments and regional organisations and local authorities to actually be heard. As with anything on this, we can always do more, and it's always striving to continuously improve the ways in which we actually do that. But there's a real commitment that was undertaken, as I say, back in 2007, 8, 9, 10, etc., around the EQ 2025. And we need to further strengthen and broaden the way that disabled people can be engaged and their organisations in the future development of our strategies and our policies. I mentioned the forum briefly before. The whole idea of this forum is that it will be co-chaired by 2 government ministers, which really shows the commitment of central government to ensure that at the very top level there is a commitment across central government. 2 ministers is really unusual to get them in the room on the same day at the same time. So the meetings will be co-chaired by Mike Penning, who's the Minister for State for Disabled People, and Norman Lamb, who is the Minister of State for Care and Support. In addition to this forum as well, there was recently, as recently as last week, a new interministerial group that again is being chaired by Mike Penning, the disabled minister, to bring together all of the ministers that have across government from the various departments. And I think there were about 20 that attended that meeting last week, which again shows a real commitment for things to happen across central government. The organisations that will be represented at this forum, will probably be, they're working on a list of around about 40 organisations, of which 9 of them will be a representative from each of the regions, and there'll be a number of other organisations. Briefly, just to look down the list, people from organisations like Action on Hearing Loss, Disability Rights UK, who are here today. There's also the representatives from Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, People First Self-Advocacy, British Deaf Association, the Alliance of Inclusive Education. It just gives you, I think this microphone might be dying in the battery in a minute, of the sort of organisations that are going to be there to ensure that the voice of disabled people gets right the way up to a very high level. What I should also state is that these meetings are not just going to be talking shops. The representatives that will attend these meetings will be undertaking work and activity as part of that. From previous forum that I've attended with some of these ministers, that it was very much about part of the meeting being, well, let government tell you policy strategies that are currently being developed and we want your input to, but also around about the day's events being workshopped so that there's activities undertaken that enables feedback on particular topics to be fed back up directly to ministers, etc. So it's really important to get that over to people, that it's not just going to be that people attend there for the day and stay and talk around things and then come home again. Also, the future agendas, as you'll see from down on here, the very first meeting is to be held on the 3rd of April, which we really appreciate and apologise, unfortunately, because of reorganisation of this event. It's a very short time scale for the South West to actually have a representative there. But in lots of the other events we've had as well, it's been quite close and difficult for organisations or regions to sort of have a formal structure to how this might happen. So what's basically happened in most of those is that there has been, on the day, a representative sort of like nominated to actually attend that first meeting and then to be able to come back to organisations and tell them what goes on, what happens. And very much this first meeting is going to be around about determining the process that goes on. But that all future agendas for these meetings, which will meet quarterly, will actually be driven by the organisations that attend the meeting. Now, to enable that to happen at a very high level, at a central role, it's really, really important that hopefully there is the structures in place that would enable local groups to be able to feed into that process as well. And we're hoping that, and we'll move on, Louise will give you a short description of how things are working across networks in the Northwest, and then there's an opportunity for you in the room to sort of come up with how you might want that to work here, what's already working in the Southwest, how you can build on that, and how you can ensure that there's a very local level feed into either regional or local subgroups or a regional sort of forum group that would inform the meetings that go on as well at a very central level. Now, one of the things around a regional structure is that it's something that we have been looking at, and I'm sure on lots of your minds will be the issue, well, how might this be funded? I can't make any promises on a funding issue, but what I have done is to develop a paper that we have put forward to see if there is any way in which we can secure some funding that will help kick off these forums in its first year, if you like. And there's no commitment at this moment in time to getting that funding because we're going through all of, as councils do and central governments, we need to wait till we get a decision to find out whether or not that's going to be possible. But there is a commitment from us to pursue that as hard as we can that will hopefully help and facilitate any regional structure. What is important around that is that if anything was to be granted, then there's no guarantee it could be future years. It's very much a kickstart approach that it can happen, and we'd look to the sustainability being developed from within the government region, etc. So, we're at this stage, to work again, we're at this a bit where there's an invitation from the Minister to ensure that the Southwest can be represented at the forum that's due to take place the 3rd of April. I think the next one after that is sometime in July, so that might help you with future planning and understanding about how you might want to react to that in the future. There's an opportunity for you to ask some questions of me now. What I'll do, if it's okay for the people in the room, first of all, I know we've got someone on Skype, and we'll take any questions that they may have first, and then we can hand it back to the room if that's okay with people. And is it Steve that's on Skype? Okay, we'll pick up the question about Steve just typing something on there. Is there a question in the room while Steve does that? If somebody has something they would like to. We've got the question, which brought my glasses.
Without sufficient resources, what guarantees this won't become yet another talking shop with little on it?
Thanks for the message. I really think some of the role and responsibility for that lies with yourselves here in the Southwest. We've heard so much today around about how important commissioning and networks and how working together is going to be really, really important. I am hoping that we could be successful in getting those resources to make things happen, but I really think sometimes it's the commitment of organisations. We started off, I think, with Rachel this morning telling us about the tough times. The tough times sometimes means that we have to do things differently, and we have to do things that engage with people that perhaps we haven't engaged with before to make things happen in the future. I fully accept that resources can be difficult, but also, the reverse side about it, are we making things more difficult for ourselves by not being able to share information, by not being able to work together collaboratively to take the advantages of what goes on? And you are in a very unique organisation, I think. As Rachel mentioned, the power, the numbers, etc., makes a very forceful case. And there's a very strong economic case being looked at and developed about the amount of resources that are actually out there with disabled people, and how their spending power and those resources might be used to achieve better outcomes.
The operative resources, the complicated with the organisation, it's not easy. One question I had was around. I think there's something here about the ODI sort of being willing to sort of support whatever regional way we choose to organise ourselves. I think that's good, and it would be good if there is some initial funding as a sort of endorsement of the fact that this is not easy. We've been trying to organise a network in this region. It is really, really difficult. Costs are significant in terms of travel. And, for instance, actually, it becomes clear, Steve's an example here, of the idea of being able to have something like video conferencing or something like that, which in the long term might save us all a lot of money, but in the short term has some investment costs. Being able to get some support from government for that type of thing will actually give the forum more credibility, because you give them the means by which the representative from the Southwest at the meetings is able to know better what goes on in the Southwest.
Okay, thanks very much. I should have added as well that there certainly is a commitment to this stage, and I think it ties into some of the resources that Steve may be asking about, is that the representative to attend the national forum, the costs and the travel costs of that person attending those meetings on a quarterly basis will actually be met. So, that is at the start, as we say. The other side of things that might be different, and again, if you have got a regional forum and something in place, is around about having a session sometimes around, innovation. How might we facilitate the opportunities for Skype to be done? And if we go back to some of the work that I did in ageing and the ageing society, we were able to set up and look at organisations. It may well be, one of the big banks that's associated in this particular area who actually have a video conferencing suite. Now, it might well be that they have a branch in Cornwall, a branch in Devon, a branch in Dorset, etc., that by engaging with those, and this is sometimes about how can we look at assets and resources within our community in a very different way to get over the sort of barriers, and that's, ties in so well with the innovative thinking around the social model of disability. How can we look and do things differently? How can we give different options to other people to help us deliver and to ensure that voice actually takes place? And I'd be more than happy to, sometime, if you've got a forum, come along and talk around some of the things and approaches that I did during ageing that might actually be useful to enable you to do that. Are there any other questions in the room? Yes. I've got you on the microphone.
Yes, I'd be interested in what sort of things this body will be looking at and how wide ranging it is. lot of it has gone actually to the kind of issues that we were
Good question, and the issues should be raised by disabled people themselves. The agenda, what I should say is, although the Office of Disability Issues will provide the secretariat for this forum, it really is a forum of disabled people and disabled people's organisations and groups, and that the agendas will be driven by the users themselves and the organisations. So if they have particular issues, then they can be fed through for the various meetings to go on those agendas. And it may well be in the future one of the things to think about when you're looking at representation at the meeting, because it could be that the whole agenda of one meeting is on a specific issue, so you would want someone with the expertise around that to actually attend that meeting. I should imagine the way the agendas are done, there might have to be one theme in the morning, one theme in the afternoon, again, those sort of stuff, but it really will come from the members in the organisation.
Thank you. So, in which case, how for the forum, how are you going to consult the organisations to find out what they want to talk about? How are you going to prepare the agenda?
And how will the forum identify how will it enable disabled people to get into what the forum is about?
Really, again, really good question, and it's something we're going to explore. Louise is going to give you an example of how things are working in the Northwest, and some examples of some groups, subgroups, and how that all works to enable things to happen then. It really is down to yourselves, and we've got a session after the conflict break, of which we'll look. The question is for you: how can you make that happen here in the Southwest? What do you have? What options are there? Do we have smaller groups that then feed into a bigger local group, or do we have it on a county basis so that the counties can feed in, and then all the county meet at a regional level? But that really be for yourselves what you see as being important agendas. And I see that there's two roles there, because there will be work that you would wish to carry out that would be very much either local or regional to you and addressing those issues, and then there'll be other issues that are really important at a national level that you want the voice of the Southwest to ensure gets regulated up to a ministerial level.
One more from Steve. That's a good sell actually. One was about the issue about rurality. Issues around being able to organise is really difficult if people live a long distance from each other, even literally to get to a local group. Secondly, it was around, in a sentence, what objectives does the government hope to achieve from these forums or from this forum, and what is the time frame?
The rural issue is really key and important. How, again, I think sometimes we need to sit back and have a look at that possibilities of what innovations can be used to enable people to actually be able to get to meetings. Lots of the telephone companies now enable you to virtually have an hour's free telephone call. And I'm sure there are ways in which we can establish at a very local level, maybe within villages and small rural pamphlets, where we can do, or you could do something around the telephone conference sort of bit, so that the voices of people can be fed in to a representative who might attend the wider local area. And we need to have a look at, the potential that the government recently took back a major contract they gave to somebody to do fast broadband and gave it out to local or more regional organisations. Opportunities, again, when we're thinking differently, how can we engage with the rural fast broadband people in that area to actually help them deliver a solution for us working with them? So again, this bit of sometimes thinking outside of the box, something different that we haven't previously thought of before, I think has real potential. And I think where Steve is in Cornwall, identifying what are the assets that they actually have, and looking to address from that point of view what are the assets in those particular areas that we're not exploring, we're not making use of, and that might be around about meeting facilities, that might be around about having people to provide transport, it might be around about people who are working with colleges or others to ensure that somebody takes the notes of meetings or records those in a very different way. One of the roles I had when I was 17, 18, I started off working in hospital radio, and I used to read the minutes onto tape for the RNIB local branch. And again, so it's about how can you use some resources that are there in a very different way to ensure that you can communicate with each other. I'm conscious of time as well, so if I pass you across to Louise.
Being positioned because of staff, so fine. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Louise Barry, and I'm from an organisation called Merseyside Disability Federation. For the clues in the name, I'm not on the local patch. I'm down from the northwest. We have had a network going up in the northwest on a kind of semi-formal basis since 2009, and it's taken two different forms. So I just want to be able to explain a little bit about how it works for us, which we've shared at some of the other events, like most of the other events that have gone on around the regions. We've shared the story, and it's just by way of illustrating how things can happen, and a bit of an honest way of discussing what the challenges have been for us. And then I'll finish up with explaining what happened at our event when it came to selecting somebody to be at that first fulfilling potential forum. Okay, so history, where we were. 2009, the lottery, in their infinite wisdom, decided that infrastructure needed a lot of work going on it. So you can see the CBSs or voluntary action organisations, wherever they're called in the different parts. And 6 organisations were asked to come together across the northwest, and we were approached to be the lead and accountable body for that partnership. Initially, we were asked to be the organisation that covered the northwest, and I went back to them and said, that doesn't make any sense. Much as I have an understanding of what goes on in Cumbria, and an understanding of Lancashire, etc., I really know best what goes on around Merseyside, and frankly, that's an awful lot to get your head around anyway. So what we insisted upon, and they absolutely agreed, was that it would be a partnership approach. So this organisation came together, or this group came together, and it was called the North West Disability Infrastructure Partnership. We just refer to it as DIFI, it made life a lot easier. So the carrot that brought us together was the fact that we were going to then be able to influence and hopefully affect some change on organisations that said that they were providing support for smaller organisations to grow and develop. What was put into that bid, and I think it's really important, and I don't for one second think this is the level that it will happen to going forward for these networks, but what was built in was a fee, certainly wasn't full cost recovery, but a fee for people to attend meetings in the area, and all their travel expenses, which we would expect anyway, to be covered. So there was an element of, when people came, they knew that there was a value put on it. I would argue it doesn't always need to be monetary, but goodness knows it helped back in 2009. So we put together a partnership agreement, and that's what it was. We co-produced a partnership agreement, and it was the bedrock from which we operated. And we kind of said what we would and wouldn't do with each other, how we would and wouldn't operate with each other. Now I think, zooming to a challenge, one organisation, as we went through this 3.5-year piece of work, found it didn't work within those parameters, and actually selected themselves out of what was happening. So what we did as organisations is stay very, very much in touch and made sure that the information still was flowing through to them. But we were very, very careful to make sure that area got lots of information as well. Other challenges. We had a little problem, and it was linked to the same problem at the same organisation, around people subscribing to the social model. So we thought all 6 organisations did. It turned out that only 5 did, and they were the ones that kept on going forward. So we had a little bit of a wrangle around what we felt was the values on which we should work together. So I would urge people to think about values when we have those discussions. We also got set up at the time, and this is key really in some ways, we got set up as a regional network just as the government decided that regions didn't exist anymore. And Government Office for North West went, and you've all had this, just put South West in or say North West. The North West Development Agency went, the North West Regional Assembly was massively watered down. So actually the kind of areas that we wanted to influence, that we had all our ducks lined up, somebody on our table before mentioned getting your ducks in order. We had our ducks, and everybody shot them before we could get to them, is effectively what happened. So we had to re-engineer what it is we wanted to do, who we wanted to influence, and how we wanted to influence. But the benefits, and this is the key one, this comes up time and time again, the coordinator of the network, and I love it, it's a tubing along. It's somebody, when you're getting on with your day job, to be on the phone saying, you know, you promised me that piece of work, and we really meant it, and we're in a room together, and just because I'm actually not physically next to it at this moment, I still really need that piece of work doing. So that was important. Benefits, funding available, shared experiences, lived experiences, not just of individuals, but of actually trying to run DPLOs. And this original partnership wasn't purely for DPLOs, however, the selection process ended up that way, and I didn't do it, so I wouldn't. We had increased strategic knowledge and sharing. We had an opportunity to respond to wider policy issues, and we were able to undertake research because we had our pockets around the North West. So it was our sub-regions, a representative of each of our sub-regions, and we were able to look at joint products, and we were able to look at research, action research, community research, but far more broad than we would have in just our own geographical area. Zoom forward to 2013, and a new network was established using the facilitation fund from the ODI. And based on our previous experiences, NDF didn't go for a Merseyside project, it was a little bit of a Merseyside project. We said, actually, no, do you know what? We think it's really invaluable to have a North West, because we've just benefited each other so much through it. This time, though, we obviously needed it to be deep in our lows. So we had representative, which is Breakthrough UK in Manchester, Cumbria Disability Network in Cumbria, Cheshire Centre for Inclusive Living in Cheshire, and Disability Equality North West for Lancashire. So there are 5 sub-regions, including ourselves, Merseyside. We wanted to have DPLOs, but what we ended up with was DPLOs, but very different in size and in what they were doing, and whether they were doing a bit of service delivery, whether they weren't, whether they were voice, whether they were campaigning. They all had different parts to them. And what we said, it was really important lessons learned. Whoever attended the meetings, and in whatever form that attendance took place, had to be people who could make decisions. So it was people who could say there and then whether we were going to move on to the next step. People who could say there and then what the issues were, not somebody that had to go back, because we found the time lag in anything it was kind of very descriptive. We also wanted people to share honest experiences of what was happening within their organisations. So that allowed us to build a bit of trust, and it did open the door to conversations to look at joint initiatives. And we shared some functions. So I'm not a blogger. I'm really not a blogger. I do not do blogs. I'm sure I'm meant to. But I do know others in the group that do blogs that just feed the ideas into theirs. And it's great. You could feed your ideas into this, and they can work. Policy responses. Sometimes somebody's better at it than somebody else. Somebody wants to be, but actually, you know what? We just didn't quite have the time, so you play to the strength of others. Methods of consultation. How are we doing consultation? Who's doing the consultation? Whether we can nick your consultation to go and do that pitch to the commissioners because it's going to be transferable. So all of those bits come into play. And we have shared resources, things like trustees pack, data sharing, and everybody was very willing to share that because there isn't competition amongst us. We had a specific piece of work around this, and it was linked to, and forgive me people in the room who don't know this, but it's the Making It Real piece of work. I'm going to look for any nods or shakes of head. Some shaking, some nods. Okay, so it may well be worse, but for the South West, when we look at that Making It Real work, and in the North West, we're tied with programme delivery. It's all about encouraging commissioners to understand what it's like for lived experience and how DPLOs can get involved in that. So we had a natural mechanism for doing some engagement, and that was really, really, really helpful. So, challenges. Okay, well, external relationships still, if anybody can explain to me on one sheet of A4 what's happening in health and social care, I'll be delighted. In fact, you can probably make a fortune out of it. Because you ask the people in health and social care, and bless them, they can't at the minute. And also those shifting people, you know, you knock on the door, you build a relationship. We heard Lynn and team talking earlier about building relationships with commissioners. A little bit of me says, oh gosh, if you could only find one that will stay still for long enough, then, you know, I'll give it a good go. And that's not, that's just the way the world is at the moment. Things are shifting, things are changing. We also didn't have funding to cover the local partners to attend local meetings, so that changed the dynamic. But we also then had a more expectation on them as to how they could be creative at capturing the local voice and how to disseminate information. So my expectation is that when I go and I talk to the others, sub-regions, I then have on a bound on me to go back and pull together Merseyside ULOs, tell them what's happening and gain their view. And that can be as much as a squished room and a cup of tea and a Garibaldi. It really can be about as highfalutin as that. But what it does is it builds networks, it builds the confidence that I'm not just going to go to things and never tell anybody what's going on. Because frankly, I think it's pointless and a little empire building, forgive me. So I don't see the use of it and I don't see the worth of that. So we are on a bound to make sure that we talk to people before and after we've been involved in things. Another issue is huge agendas. I am tempted to just leave that one hanging. I mean, there's so much. I mean, I have no idea what they're going to put in the fulfilling potential forum meetings, but oh my goodness, if we started writing a list on the board now, I think we could still be here tomorrow morning and come up with all things. Because there are a huge amount of issues out there at the moment. So sometimes it's very hard to focus on something. This particular forum that we have, this network, it's very much focused on as a steers. We've been looking at local accounts, and we've been looking at accountability, and we've been looking at joins at work of making it real. That has helped. Positives, as there are. Okay, again, the coordinator. It does help. It doesn't matter in my eyes who it is. It really just helps that we've got somebody somewhere that's tuning in. The partners this time round were selected more organically, so we didn't have that disconnect with the values. And I think that's important to either thrash it out and accept there's a difference, or to maybe work with each other in some way to work out what they are. We've got really good consistent attendance, and that's as much about it being senior people in the organisation, and then into that being almost a peer support network in its own right. Because I don't know about you guys, but we certainly find running deep in ULOs tough. We find it quite hard. We find it quite challenging. We heard from we did the role reversal on our table, and I had to be a commissioner, and I struggled. Well, I didn't struggle with what to say because I've heard it before, but I struggled with saying it. You know, it's hard. It can be hard. We also have mutual shared ownership and responsibility, shared experiences, and again, we play to each other's strengths, and we have increased opportunities for sustainability. So, you know, we can bail each other, and making this sound perfect. It's not. It really isn't perfect. I promise you. And there's days. I mean, I laughingly, I've opened an email and a static potato board that says, "When are we going to get meeting?" I've got it. So, you know, it's not perfect. It really isn't perfect. But it's not bad either. It's not bad. I think that's with a negative comment, but it's not bad. It works. It's a bit rough around the edges. I've just realised that the ODI that I've funded it is sat in the room. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. No, it's got its learning to go on still. But we do have a regional voice at a strategic level. And that might be a matter of some quick phone calls when it comes to an issue that's out. Or I might get a quick phone call to say, we're putting this consultation, we're doing a response to it, what do you think? And I'll say, give me 24 hours and I'll see so-and-so in our area and I'll say what they think. And it is that kind of organic desire to make a bit of a difference. It is what's present. So we have some top tips. Agree a respectful way of working together. And I think the wording of that is respect. And you can call it whatever you like. You can layer it with documents and everything else, and we have a code of conduct. But agree, all that is a respectful way of us working together. Ensure legitimacy. Now, it's not always possible to have a mandate, and it's not always possible, and I would say ever possible, to be truly representative. But it is possible to share information and to work into and across sub-regions. So it's a legitimacy and it's an authenticity, and I think that that's something that people need to focus on. We've got to work at earning and giving respect, and I'm hoping that one is self-explanatory. But there is a strength in numbers and in working to each other's strengths. There needs to be someone servicing it. Coordination, coordination. Who keeps the light on in the fridge when the door is closed, is what my colleague at Breakthrough calls it, and I think I'm the person who keeps the light on at the minute. And you can't force an effective network. You can't make something go. So actually commitment's needed. Value your contributions as much as you value those of others, and recognise you're only getting out of it what you put in. So going forward, we have Brave New World. I got told off for saying that in the past. It's not sure it was Brave and New, but nonetheless, we have Brave New World. We have the Fulfilling Potential Forum coming up. So the future for the North West is that it will require the network in the North West to do new things and to do things differently. So the network as it stands now runs until the end of September. But actually we've got this overlapping period now where there's a new game in play, if you like. There's a new opportunity for people to influence and have voice. So at our North West event, what we did, and I'll just share with you because sometimes you go to these and people what happens elsewhere. So at the North West one, we were the host organisation, and actually we took ourselves out of being the nominated person because we were the coordinator. We took ourselves out of the nomination process, and we invited somebody different from the room to represent us at the first Fulfilling Potential Forum. And we then offered and said what we will do, and this is what we'll do, is to bring together groups to hear the feedback from whoever went and to organise or plan for a way to go forward. And our region, and I think this has happened in most, and I'm looking for guidance, is that they suggested setting up a rotation, so a rotating rep. I think it's really good because that actually then emphasises the need for whoever attends to canvass the views and opinions and experiences of disabled people and DPV allows in the Southwest, but in the Northwest for us, and to ensure that effective feedback is given and an effective handover. So you've got that kind of requirement for communication going on from the very, very outset, so you're not undoing bureaucracy, you're actually getting it as a flow through from the beginning. I know Tiger's going to work with you in the next session this afternoon, and hers is to discuss your regional network and your choice. And obviously I'm bound to put in there and your voice. I don't want to leave you thinking that we've got it all sussed. We haven't. There will be things that we could be doing better, I'm sure. But we do have something that looks like an effective way of working in the Northwest. And I just hope it's added some thoughts to your conversations this afternoon. And thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Right, it is now 2:22. So if I give people 10 minutes, we come back just after 2:30. No, I think, okay, fine. I'm happy to take questions. I think the answer is the questions will actually be the subject matter of the next session. And it might make sense to sort of move into that. But, okay, go on. You've got a question. Hang on a moment. I know that Steve's got some comments.
It sounds like you have to develop something kind of effective and something kind of really organising coordination is moving up and down, and it's certainly something we could all look to aspire to. But the burning question is, what happens after September? Obviously, we've talked about audits and that kind of thing. What are your thoughts?
I have to confess, we've already agreed. I can't say this because potential funders, we need the funding. Okay. If, however, no, what we've already decided before we knew any of this existed is that as a peer group, it's too important not to have. And actually, in Merseyside, we've kind of also, we're an infrastructure, so we're kind of a voice. We're not a delivering DPUI. So we've always had groups together on Merseyside that come together and talk. I wouldn't step it for a big clock. it's really great. Not everybody agrees. We get lovely debates. We get my Merseyside place, unless my organisation goes, will still happen. And we've already agreed around the North West, but we will still continue to meet because it genuinely is very valuable. However, for effective feedback to happen into the sub-regions, we would need to find some business somewhere, I would suggest, covering the vector.
Yeah.
Well, who knows? But there's all sorts of different pots that are kicking around. I was saying on our table earlier, we've got a real interest. We've come together as DPULOs and discussed those issues, but we've never done is tagged ourselves onto a topic. So we've never tagged ourselves to help. So we haven't kind of done the repeatable of it yet. Absolutely. But my bit would be, it would need to be us that were doing the coordination. So if we were able to source something on Merseyside, then we would spread the love across the Northwest. But if Cumbria managed to get something, I'd be handing on my colleague Mark's door to say, great, can you do this bit next? Because it really is not about owning the coordination, the value. In fact, sometimes that's not the easiest thing. I sometimes wish rocking up to the meetings, having the chats and feeding back would be quite a luxury in lots of ways. So it does need resourcing, and I particularly think it comes into the fulfilling potential bit. I think you guys need to think about how it is going to be resourced. I'm not suggesting that isn't the case, but interestingly, there is a willingness.
I'll repeat what Steve has written on the computer here, but I think it works well as effectively almost the opening statement for the next slide. So, as Louise points out, there are many challenges on lots of different levels. Perhaps a strong DPULO cooperative working together for mutual benefit can affect meaningful change on a regional level. Interestingly, that's finished off with a question mark. I really like the idea of a regional council, DPULO reps, democratically elected and employing a coordinator to forward the council's aims and objectives very centrally in the southwest, is really a debate and consideration. That can be an appropriate item to consider in the next session. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Louise, and I appreciate it's a long way to go. But it's actually really good to hear how effective it can be when it's sufficiently resourced and supported by the local member organisations. So some things are up to that. Okay, right, it is now 2:25, but with that please at 2:35 so we can start the next session on time. Thank you.